Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. For those new here, my name is Nikki, I'm an author and editor, and I post videos here on YouTube about writing, editing, reading and all the other things I love, and it's the latter we're here for today because we're going to be talking about one of my favourite things, Black Butler. I only discovered Black Butler about 6 months ago, but I'm a huge fan already and I'm avidly trying to see all the adaptations and get everything related to Black Butler. As such, I thought I would do today a bit of an overview about some of the adaptations that are out there, some of the different versions of the story you can see, just with a few brief thoughts on those that I have already experienced. To start us off, I should probably just explain for anyone who doesn't know what Black Butler is, what the story is about. It originated as a manga written by Yana, and the story is set in Victorian London. We meet Ciel Phantom Hive. Now he is a young boy, he's 10 to 13 depending on when in the story things are taking place, and he is the son of an earl. He's been kidnapped and sold to a cult who wish to sacrifice him in order to call forth a demon. They do manage to summon a demon, however the demon offers the deal to Ciel and not to the cult members. Ciel agrees to the demon's contract terms, which are that he will help Ciel get revenge on those who have brought him to this terrible state, and in return, when that revenge is complete, the demon will get to eat his soul. Ciel names the demon Sebastian Michaelis, and in order for their relationship to continue without any questions being raised, Sebastian takes on the role of Ciel's butler, hence the title Black Butler. As Earl Phantom Hive, Ciel has a debt to pay to the Queen. He must keep track of what's going on in London's underworld, particularly dealing with any supernatural threats. So having a powerful demon working alongside him is very handy for Ciel in that regard. So the story follows both the search for the truth about what happened to Ciel, while also dealing with various subplots that go on as Ciel has different cases to handle for the Queen. That is the basic story. So from here I'll talk about the different versions, starting with the manga. So, the manga of Black Butler began in 2006 and it is an ongoing series. We are up to 29 volumes in book form at present, 29 in Japanese, we're 28 in English, we're just waiting for a release date for the 29th, which I imagine will be in a few months' time. I've already told you a bit about the story and I absolutely love this manga. I really like the drawing style, and you can actually see how Yana has improved over the years as well. Sebastian is absolutely gorgeous the way he's drawn. I deny anyone's ability not to fall in love with him. As I said, if you're a manga fan and you like supernatural fantasy stories with an absolutely gorgeous demon, then do check it out. While we're talking about books, I will also mention some of the other books that have been released. There are two lovely art books by Yana. They are both available in English, however the first volume is really hard to pick up in English now, but it's worth getting in the Japanese version if you can't find the English one, because most of it is artwork. So the only real bit of writing is a little bit at the end that talks about a few sentences for each picture, the provenance of why they were drawn, where they came from. Other than that, it's just visual, so you can get the Japanese edition without too many problems. The other books that I'm going to list, I've actually only found out about in the last week. I don't believe any of them have been released in English. One or two may have been released in German. So essentially these are Japanese release works, and I do want to try and get hold of copies, and so I'm going to start looking into that. It may be I have to wait until I take a trip, my first ever trip to Japan later this year, and I'll have to look for them there if I can't get them elsewhere first. First up, in 2008 they released a book called His Butler Assembles, which was a character guide for the series. They then released in 2009 and 2010 Black Record and Final Record, which were chronicles about the creation of the anime. And then in 2009-2010 also they released volumes 1 and 2 of Rainbow Butler, and this featured artwork based on the series but by different artists, not Yana. So those are ones I am keen to try and check out, but definitely the art books I can recommend if you're a fan of the series. They have loads of gorgeous illustrations in. So from there, I'd like to talk a bit about CDs and video games. So, CDs and video games. they have done 2 drama CDs of Black Butler. The first one released in 2007 and the second one in 2008. The 2007 one essentially follows the storyline of the first volume of the manga. Meanwhile, the 2008 one follows the Jack the Ripper story arc, or the Red Butler story arc as it's also called. And the second one featured certain members of the anime cast, including Ono Daisuke, who plays Sebastian Michaelis. They also did a video game. This was called Phantom and Ghost for Nintendo DS in 2009. Now I don't play video games, so I haven't had an opportunity to have a go at and review this, but if you have, do drop a comment below and let us know what you thought. Finally, there have been soundtrack recordings relating to the anime, and some of these have included character songs for the different characters, and they're all fun songs, but in particular the 4 songs for Sebastian are absolutely brilliant. My favourite one is Arushichiji no Nichijo, which is just hilarious. The lyrics are so funny, and Anata no Koi is also really good. And you can hear some of these character songs on YouTube, so do have a look for them. So now it's time, I think, to move on to the anime. So the initial run of the Black Butler anime was from 2008 to 2010, over 2 seasons. This comprised of 36 episodes and 7 overs. And it began following the manga storyline for the first few episodes. However, after the Jack the Ripper arc, the anime really went off in its own direction and just started doing its own thing. So you can't read the manga and see the anime and expect the same story, because they are entirely different. I prefer the manga, however I appreciate the anime. Ono Daisuke, who plays Sebastian Michaelis, has an absolutely brilliant voice. He's so sexy and wonderful as Sebastian, and I love him. I do like some aspects of the storyline in the anime. Some episodes worked really well, there were some brilliant moments. However, it pursued humour a lot more, I'd say, than the manga does. There is humour in the manga, but the manga goes to darker places, I think, overall than the anime. The anime kept things a bit lighter and a bit jokier. If you're already a fan of the manga, you will like the anime. And if you haven't read the manga, you can watch the anime and still get enjoyment from it. It doesn't matter that the two diverged quite drastically. However, having said that, in 2014 they went back to the manga and they did what was kind of a season 3 of the anime, but it was simply the Book of Circus arc, which was 10 episodes long as an anime. And this went back to the source material of the manga, followed the story pretty closely. And I really enjoy this animation. I think it worked brilliantly. Really great performances from everyone again. Also in 2014 they released an OVA, 2 episodes long, of the Book of Murder storyline as well. And that again worked brilliantly. Went back to the manga, kept things strictly following the original storyline. So from there, let's talk a little bit about the film adaptation. So far there have been 2 film adaptations of Black Butler, 1 live action and 1 animation. The live action Black Butler film came out in 2014 and starred Mizushima Hiro as Sebastian Michaelis. Now this departed from the source material. The story was no longer set in Victorian London, but set in a more of a modern time. And so instead of Ciel Phantom Hive, we have one of his ancestors, his descendants, sorry, I should say, not ancestors. He's the ancestor. One of his descendants, and it's a woman this time. However, she's disguising herself as a boy for reasons that I won't divulge because I don't want to spoil the plot. And due to some unforeseen difficult circumstances with the death of her parents, she's had to call upon Sebastian and make a deal with him to help her. So in some aspects we're following the kind of storyline that Sebastian and Ciel had, but as I said, it's set in a modern time and it's kind of implied that Sebastian has been involved in the family ever since Ciel, and that this is just the latest person in the line to make a pact with him. Now this movie got some negative reviews at the time, however I really love it. I think Mizushima Hiro comes across brilliantly as Sebastian, and although the story doesn't follow the manga or the anime in any way, it does its own thing. It has enough elements from them that it's familiar, and the fact it is a little bit different keeps you guessing with the action and adventure and what's going to happen in the story. I think it looked great, well acted, good production, and overall it's definitely worth watching if you're a Black Butler fan, but you could also watch the movie with no knowledge of Black Butler and still enjoy it. After that, in 2015, they did an animation film of what's the luxury cruise liner storyline, which they called the Book of Atlantic for the purposes of the animated film. So again, we've gone back to the manga source material, and it's a very, very close adaptation of the storyline from the manga. Many of the cast members from the original animation series have returned, including Onodesuki as Sebastian Michaelis, and I really love this one. This is a story that's all-encompassing in some ways, so you could watch this film without knowing anything about Black Butler and get enjoyment from it and follow what was happening. But obviously there are elements, references to the past and things that will mean more to you if you are already a fan and familiar with the manga or the anime series. So finally, all that's left to discuss are the musicals. So, the Black Butler musicals, I cannot overemphasize how much I adore these. The Japanese love doing musicals for their anime and manga shows, but many of them are a bit hit and miss. I saw one for Vampire Night, which was average. It had moments that were okay, but wasn't very memorable. The one for Bleach was awful. The only ones I've really seen that have absolutely captured it so far are Death Note and these musicals for Black Butler. There are 5 musicals for Black Butler that have been put on over 7 productions. So I'm going to run through them quickly first, and then I'll talk about which ones are my favourites and why and things. So first off, in 2009, we did That Butler Friendship. Now this was an original story. It was their first attempt at a musical, and it was a just over 2-hour production that only had 7 songs in it. Now the songs are okay. I rather like 3 or 4 of them. The other 3 or so I could take or leave. But it did establish the idea of a Black Butler musical, and really they went from strength to strength from there. In 2010, the possibly musical with the longest title in the entire world was created. Black Butler, The Most Beautiful Death in the World, 1000 Souls and a Fallen Shinigami is the full title of this musical, though it's generally abbreviated to The Most Beautiful Death in the World. This had an initial production in 2010, followed by a rerun in 2012. And this was again an original story, so using the characters but not following a plot from the manga or anime or anything, just doing its own thing. They changed that in 2014 when they did the 3rd musical, Licorice That Blazes the Earth. Now this had an initial run in 2014 and a second run in 2015, at which point they did a cast change, which I will talk about in a moment. And this one followed the Jack the Ripper storyline from the manga and anime. In 2016, they did the Noah's Ark Circus, so the Book of Circus story arc that they previously did the animation for that I mentioned before. And finally, in 2018, they did Tango on the Campagna, which follows that luxury liner cruise ship arc, which they used for the animated film Book of Atlantic. So those are all the Black Butler musicals. And now I'll just mention in a little bit more detail some of my thoughts on them and on the actors in. So, as I mentioned earlier, the first show of the Black Butler musicals is the weakest, and I think that's partly due to my lack of understanding of Japanese, because there's so much talking in it. I can follow the story, but I can't really appreciate all the nuances, I think, in the jokes and things going on. I am learning Japanese, so hopefully, eventually, as I improve, I'll be able to pick up more and more each time I watch. But it is probably my least favourite of them all, simply because they didn't get the song to talking ratio very good in that first one. One of my favourites is the second one, The Most Beautiful Death in the World. This show worked really well. It had an excellent plot idea, some fun new characters alongside our traditional usual cast, and some awesome music. They had a lot more songs in the second one, really filled it out with music, a bit of dancing, and really memorable, catchy songs that I like to sing around the house. Licorice That Blazes the Earth, for me, was in some ways a step backwards. It's not bad, it has some really awesome moments and songs, but I felt some of the scenes, the dialogue went on a little bit too long, and They just needed to move the pacing up a little bit. And because of that, it sits kind of next up from That Butler Friendship on my list. So it's in 4th place, if you like, if we're saying we'll put them in order of 5 up to 1. We've got That Butler Friendship at 5, and Licorice That Blazes the Earth at 4. Sitting in the 3rd position is the next one actually, Noah's Ark Circus. This was a really strong musical. Again, it has some brilliant songs in it. The setting and the staging were absolutely fabulous, the way they did the circus and the performers. It looks fantastic, and really, I mean, I think the production values in the first one were quite low, but they were obviously just trying it out. And as these shows have gone on, the production values and the amount of money you can tell they've put into costumes and staging and the like has really bumped up and improved. And you can definitely see that in the production elements. So then that leaves us with the top 2 slots, which I think in my 2nd place slot is Tango on the Campagna. This is visually a really strong show. There's some wonderful set pieces with the zombies and the way they've staged it. Some brilliant songs, really catchy again, memorable songs, some great moments. But I think overall the most beautiful death in the world, if I could only pick one to watch forever and ever, I'd pick that one with Tango in the Campagna, Tango on the Campagna, if I can say it, as a close second. And I said I'd speak briefly about performances. Now, in the first 2 musicals, plus the first run of the 3rd, Matsushita Yuya played Sebastian Michaelis. And from the 2nd run of the 3rd show through up until the present, the role was taken over by Furukawa Yuta. And it's interesting, they both approach this role in very different ways, and I saw someone online describe it as Yuya follows anime Sebastian more, whereas Yuta is more manga Sebastian. And I think that is actually a really good analogy, because Matsushita Yuya was really awesome. He was hilarious, he was funny, he was super cute, and that is a little bit more, as I said earlier, with the focus on the humour a little bit more in the anime, and that comes across in the show. However, I felt he pushed that too far. When he did his final performances, which was Licorice That Blazes the Earth, I felt he was trying to be funny too much, and he lost some of his performance in that. He was trying to be silly too often. So I think it was a good time for him to end. I think he was at his peak in The Most Beautiful Death in the World, when he got that balance just right between making jokes and being serious. When Furukawa Yuta took over, he brought to Sebastian a much more demonic edge. With Furukawa Yuta, we never forget that Sebastian is a demon, which you could have it with Matsushita Yuya's performance. He really plays up the darker side. He doesn't ignore humour, he makes a few jokes as the productions allow, but you really get a sense that he is something non-human in the way he acts, the way he reacts to things. And because of that, at first I loved Matsushita Yuya best, but I've come to, I think, appreciate Furukawa Yuta in the role more. Now, if you're looking to see or hear these musicals, you can find a fair bit of the music around here on YouTube. The first 2 shows are not very easy to get hold of on DVD anymore, but you can find some footage again here. But musicals 3, 4 and 5 are available on DVD. You won't be able to just walk into a store in America or here in Australia or anything and pick them up, but you can order them in from Japan, from places like Amazon Japan or from CD Japan. They will be pricey, but they are so awesome, and if you're a Black Butler fan, I don't think you can avoid seeing these musicals because they are brilliant. And if I had to pick, I'm a huge fan of the manga, but if I was told I could only see one version of Black Butler ever for the rest of my life, I would probably pick the musicals because I love them so much. So on that note, I will close. I'll be back again very soon with another vlog for you though, so goodbye for now everyone.